Hello, welcome to class, and this is the fourth module of the course Audit and Assurance. Audit and Assurance. We'll be looking into the internal control and control testing, internal controls and control testing. Under this, we will understand the COSO internal control framework. We'll look into identifying key control activities relevant to audit. We'll also look into documentation and evaluation of control design and implementation. And lastly, we will look into testing, operating effectiveness, and communicate. First, why internal control matters in audits. And under this, we'll look into the purpose of internal control. And the first is providing reasonable assurance regarding the first reliability of financial reporting, effectiveness and efficiency of operation, and lastly, compliance with law and regulation. And looking at it from the auditor's perspective, why internal control matters is for strong controls, that is, less substantive testing needed under this, and for weak controls where more substantive testing is required. And also, understanding control is essential for a risk-based audit approach. And then the ultimate goal for internal control is to assess whether controls prevent or detect material mistakes. Let's look at the COSO internal control framework, which has five components. The first is the control environment, and under this, it's actually a tone at the top. It deals with culture, ethics, and governance, and it's actually the foundation for all other components. And the second one is the risk assessment. And under this, it deals with how the entity identifies and responds to business risk affecting financial reporting. Also, we have the information and communication and as another component, which deals with the systems that capture, process, and report transactions accurately. The fourth one is the control activities, which deals with the policy and procedures that enforce management directives, such as the approval, reconciliations, and the likes. And the last component is monitoring, dealing with the ongoing or periodic review to ensure control operates effectively. And all these five components must be present and functioning for effective key control activity relevant to audits. Auditor focus on control over financial reporting, and this key control can be grouped into types. The first is the authorization and approval. And under this, the purpose is to prevent unauthorized transaction. An example of this is a purchase order over maybe $10,000 required CFO approval. Another is the segregation of duty, and the purpose of this activity is to prevent one person from controlling all phases of a transaction. And the example of this is different staff authorize, record, and custody of assets. These different staff have the opportunity to authorize, record, and have custody of assets. And the next is the physical control, and the purpose is to safeguard assets. Example of this is a locked storage for cash inventory or a restricted system access. Another is the reconciliation and review, and the purpose of this is to ensure accuracy and completeness. And an example of this is a monthly bank reconciliation carried out, and also the budget versus actual analysis. Another is the IT control, and the purpose of this is to ensure system integrity and data accuracy. And for this, An example is access control, input validation, program change control. Looking at the documenting internal control, we have methods that are being used, and these are actually often combined together. The first is the narrative description. And for this, it's actually written and having detailed explanation, and it's good for complex or unique processes. We also have a flow chart, which deals with visual representation of process flow, and it highlights control points and segregation of duty clearly. And we also have the internal control questionnaires, and it's a standardized checklist which helps to um, which is efficient but may miss entity specific control. And the purpose of documentation is actually to support risk assessment, to guide audit strategy, and lastly to provide evidence for review. And in evaluating control design and implementation, there are two key questions to actually look into. Two key questions to look into. And under this, looking at the design effectiveness, questions like would the control, if operating properly, prevent or detect a material misstatement? And this helps to evaluate, it is evaluated through understanding and professional judgment. And the second is under implementation, where we have a question like, has the control been put in place and is it being used? Is being asked. And it's used to for testing. It is tested via inquiry, observation, and inspection. And if controls are poorly designed or not implemented, auditor cannot rely on them. They can't rely on them, and that places a huge importance on these two aspects of control, and auditor cannot rely on them, and it must assess risk as high and perform extensive substantive testing. Looking at the testing operating effectiveness of control, and this deals with when to test control. And to test control, it's done when planning to rely on control to reduce substantive testing, and when substantive procedures alone are insufficient. And a way to test them is through inquiry plus inspection, which is the review, signed approval. Another is the observation, that is watch the process, and watching the process. And the last on how to test operative effectiveness of control is the performance, and under this, auditor performs the control. And a consideration that need to be put in place, the considerations that need to be put in place are: one, automated control, which talks about the testing once if IT environment is stable. And we also have the consideration of manual control, which tests throughout the period, and is provides for risk of inconsistency. And another, which is the last one, is the extent of testing depends on frequency, importance, and expected deviation rates. And an indication, the indicators of material weakness: we have fraud by senior management, we have the restatement of financials, we have the ineffective oversight by audit committee. And in communicating control matters, the auditor has his own responsibility, which is all significant deficiency and material weakness must be communicated in writing to management and those charged with governance. Also, communication extent. Looking at the communication extent, the description of the deficiency must be looked into. The potential effect on financial reporting must be looked into, and there must be recommendation. They're optional but common. It's optional but common, and you have to know that recommendation should not create a self-review trait. And another is the timing, which talks about material weakness, which communicates as soon as practicable rather. And for other deficiencies, often at audit. In conclusion, internal control is a process and not a one-time activity. And COSO's five component provide a complete framework for evaluation. And control testing is necessary when relying on control or when substantive procedures are insufficient. And the deficiency evaluation requires professional judgment about likelihood of magnitude. And lastly, communication to governance is critical audit output. And you need to remember that strong control reduce audit risk and enhance financial reliability. Thank you.